The Great Fire of London, entire city burned to ashes at 1 a.m. On September 2nd, year 1666, Thomas Farriner, the king's baker, woke to find his house on Pudding Lane engulfed in flames. Within minutes, his family was scrambling across rooftops to escape the inferno. One maid, too terrified to make the leap, became the fire's first victim. Neither Farriner nor anyone watching the flames lick up the timber buildings could have imagined that this single bakery fire would consume 13,200 houses, 87 churches, and the very soul of medieval London over the next 4 days. But here's what makes this story truly haunting. It didn't have to happen. The city that refused to listen, London, in 1666, was a powder keg wrapped in kindling. The city hadn't seen significant rain in 10 months. The summer had been brutally hot, desiccating the thousands of medieval timber buildings that leaned so close together, their upper floors nearly touched across narrow streets. The Thames, London's lifeline, had shrunk to a mere trickle, leaving water supplies dangerously low. City authorities had been warned repeatedly about the fire risk. Just months before, the surveyor of London had written a chilling prediction about one entire flame that could consume the city. His solution? Create fire breaks by demolishing the most dangerous buildings. The city corporation rejected the proposal. Too expensive, too disruptive to business. That decision would cost them everything. The first hours. A catastrophe unfolds. When Farriner's bakery erupted in flames, Lord Mayor Thomas Bloodworth was roused from sleep and brought to the scene. He surveyed the growing fire, made a judgment that would haunt him forever, and uttered one of history's most regrettable lines, "Pish, a woman might piss it out." He went back to bed. The Lord Mayor's fatal error wasn't just his crude dismissal. It was his refusal to authorize the immediate demolition of buildings in the fire's path. Under English law, property owners had to be compensated for demolished structures. Bloodworth, worried about the expense and potential lawsuits, hesitated. Every minute of delay was a gift to the flames. By dawn, the fire had reached the Thames warehouses on Thames Street, packed with combustibles, oil, tallow, brandy, hay, coal, and timber. When the flames hit these stores, the fire transformed from a local emergency into an apocalyptic inferno. Barrels of brandy exploded like bombs. Melting tallow created rivers of flame. The fire generated its own weather system, spawning whirlwinds of fire that leapt across streets and even the Thames itself. When the king became a firefighter, by Sunday morning, panic gripped London. Samuel Pepys, the famous diarist, climbed the Tower of London and watched an infinite great fire spreading in all directions. He immediately took a boat to Whitehall Palace to inform King Charles II. What happened next was extraordinary. Charles II, whose father had been executed by English revolutionaries just 17 years earlier, could have fled for safety. Instead, he rode into the burning city alongside his brother, the Duke of York. The king personally fought the fire, passing buckets, wielding a spade, even offering golden guineas from his own pocket to exhausted firefighters. Witnesses reported seeing the king, covered in soot and sweat, working shoulder to shoulder with commoners. He stayed in the danger zones for hours, helping coordinate firefighting efforts when the paralyzed Lord Mayor proved utterly incompetent. This wasn't staged heroics. Charles understood his throne remained unstable, and abandoning London could trigger another revolution. The city's desperate defense. Medieval firefighting techniques were primitive: leather buckets, hand-pumped water engines, and fire hooks to pull down burning buildings. Against a firestorm of this magnitude, they were laughably inadequate. The only real weapon was demolition, creating gaps too wide for flames to cross. But demolition required gunpowder, and using explosives in a city packed with terrified people was dangerous. More critically, it required destroying entire neighborhoods, often before the fire even reached them. Property owners resisted, clutching deeds and arguing with demolition crews even as flames roared closer. By Monday, the fire had created its own horrific logic. It became so hot that it melted the lead roof of St. Paul's Cathedral, sending rivers of molten metal flowing through streets. The stones of the cathedral exploded from the heat, turning into deadly projectiles. Ancient books in the cathedral's booksellers' district simply vaporized in the superheated air before flames even touched them. The firestorm generated winds strong enough to lift burning debris hundreds of feet into the air, where wind carried them blocks ahead, starting new fires faster than the old ones could be contained. Witnesses described a sound like 1,000 iron chariots racing over stones as the fire advanced through street after street. The refugee crisis. As the fire consumed neighborhood after neighborhood, over 100,000 people fled. Imagine, nearly 80% of London's population homeless within 48 hours. The roads heading out of the city became clogged with carts piled high with belongings. The fields beyond London's walls transformed into vast refugee camps, with makeshift tents sprawling for miles. Wealthy merchants who'd been counting gold coins on Friday were sleeping under hedges by Monday. The fire was a great leveler. Samuel Pepys buried his expensive wine and prized Parmesan cheese in his garden before fleeing. Even the Navy's warehouses were evacuated, with crucial supplies moved to safety as the fire approached the Tower of London. Remarkably, looters were rare. The scale of the disaster seemed to stun people into solidarity rather than chaos. Or perhaps it was the military presence. Charles II ordered troops to patrol the ruins, authorized to kill looters on sight. The scapegoat. As smoke still rose from smoldering ruins, London needed someone to blame. Rumors spread wildly. Catholics had started it, Dutch saboteurs, French agents. The fire had begun just weeks after England's humiliating defeat in the Second Anglo-Dutch War, when Dutch ships had sailed up the Thames and burned English vessels. Surely this was revenge? A French watchmaker named Robert Hubert confessed to starting the fire, claiming he'd thrown a firebomb through Farriner's bakery window. Never mind that Hubert's confession was riddled with impossibilities, or that he was likely mentally disturbed. Never mind that he couldn't have physically reached the window he described. An angry public demanded justice, and Hubert was hanged at Tyburn. We know now that Farriner's oven was the true culprit, its embers likely falling into stored fuel or wood shavings. But London needed a villain more than it needed the truth. Rising from the ashes. The fire finally died on September 6th when the wind changed and fire breaks finally held. The damage was apocalyptic. Approximately 13,200 houses, 87 parish churches, St. Paul's Cathedral, most city government buildings, and countless irreplaceable medieval structures were gone. The area inside the old Roman walls was a moonscape of ash and charred stone. Yet miraculously, only 6 deaths were officially recorded, though the true toll was certainly higher, particularly among the poor whose deaths went unrecorded. The relatively low casualty count was London's one stroke of fortune in those terrible 4 days. Christopher Wren seized the opportunity to redesign London with wide streets and stone buildings. The city that rose from the ashes was safer, more modern, and more magnificent than what had been lost. But it had lost its medieval soul forever. Today, the monument to the Great Fire stands 202 feet tall, the exact distance from its base to Farriner's Bakery on Pudding Lane. It serves as a reminder. One ignored spark, one dismissed warning, one moment of arrogance was all it took to reduce the greatest city in England to ashes. The Great Fire of London proved that civilization, for all its grandeur, is always just one small flame away from catastrophe.